Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we're continuing on in our journey throughout this book. And today, we're going to talk about our market revolution and the formation of our American economy. All right, let's get into it. So it's called Chapter 10 is called America's Economic Revolution, but it can also be attributed to the American Market Revolution. Same thing. Okay, if you remember from world history and you got free market, that's kind of where it comes from. Capitalism. Fun times. All right. So changing in the American population between 1820 and 1840, the population drastically increased, and it happened at a faster rate than in Europe. Immigration increased rapidly during and after the 1830s, and you have this old immigration where immigrants are coming from mainly Western Europe. In your book, they give examples of the Germans and the Irish coming. Most settled in the urban areas of the Northeast, and like I just said, the highest numbers came from Germany and Ireland. Germans tended to move to the Northwest, aka the Old Northwest, the Ohio River area, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio. And the Irish, because of the potato famine, they would move to the urban areas of cities. And here's a place in Ohio, in Cincinnati, where a district is called Over the Rhine because a lot of Germans settled in that area. And as you can see, this is a destination of overseas immigrants from Ireland, and they mainly came to the United States. Okay, continuing on, you have this idea of nativism, and you could almost say this is the first instance of racism, legal racism in the United States, just because it's basically the distrust and dislike of foreigners where they favor native-born Americans. And what's funny about that is because they were immigrants too that came to America, and they just happened to be born in America from immigrant parents. So it's confusing, right? But nativists wanted to slow or stop the influx of immigrants coming. Reasons for it: immigrants would work for lower wages, so they would, kind of take jobs away from the people because they would work for pennies on the dollar. There was also a belief that immigrants were destroying America and its culture, and that comes up time and time again in the United States. And there's also this fear of the Catholic Church and the Pope, because many Catholics, many of the Irish are Catholic, and they would be coming to America, and there was fear that the Pope and the Catholic Church would reign supreme in America. Kind of over-the-top exaggerations, but hey, we weren't living during that time. And they were also stealing the votes. And some examples of nativism: the Supreme Order of the Star-Spangled Banner would then coincide to become the Know Nothing Party, or the American Party, and they are the people who are advocating nativism. And then you also have this NINA, which stands for No Irish Need Apply. So anytime there was unemployment signs or employment signs, we are hiring, they would also attach NINA. So there you go. No Irish Need Apply. Native Americans beware of foreign influence. And here you have, you saw this yesterday or a couple days ago, the last lecture, cartoon supporting Know Nothing, that Irish and American immigrants were stealing American votes. And they're the lager of beer that stands for Germany, this Irish whiskey stands for Ireland, and they're carrying the ballot box, stealing the vote. Okay, so transportation, communication, and technology. So the 1820s saw an increase in canals, especially in New York, the formation of the Erie Canal, 363 miles connecting Albany to Buffalo. And then you have something called Clinton's Big Ditch, where the governor of New York would, it was his ditch. That's what they nicknamed it. It was also built by the Irish, who were nicknamed Paddies, and also gave New York City access to Chicago as it stretched across the Great Lakes. Canals also stimulated the settlement in the Northwest. It was also very cheap to travel. Railroads. The first railroad company is the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad in 1830. But there were early problems with railroads because there are different gauges on different tracks. So certain railroads, certain trains couldn't go on certain tracks. And there were frequent accidents and erratic schedules. And because of the explosion of railroads later on, railroads actually helped create our time zones here in America. So here's a map of the Erie Canal, Albany, all the way across Lake Ontario. So Chicago's over here. And then the B&O Railroad from Monopoly. Oh, that clicked, right? 1850s saw a huge increase in railroad development. Trunk lines, which were shorter lines, consolidated into longer lines, and that helped decrease the importance of canals. The funding of railroads, kind of, where does it come from? Where's the money come from? So state, local, and federal governments all played a part. State and local governments gave capital for these companies, and the federal government gave funding for railroads through land grants. Most railroads were located in the Northeast, and this, again, is going to create a further disconnect between the North and the South. More on that during the Civil War. And Morse code was created by Samuel B. Morse, and one of the first news sent across the telegraph was James K. Polk's nomination for the Democratic Party in 1844. So railroads mainly over here in the Northeast. This is obviously before the Civil War. And look at the South. And not many. And that's James K. Polk, future president. So commerce and industry. So there was a growth of corporations in America, increased during the 1830s, which made them possible by paying a fee. Then you have this idea of limited liability, where stockholders would only lose the value of their stock if the corporation fails. So this is going to increase investment in corporations. Technological advances. We already talked about Eli Whitney and his interchangeable parts, making all these separate parts to then be built for the same exact model over and over and over again. And so this process would be used for bicycles, sewing machines, typewriters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Charles Goodyear is going to help develop the rubber industry, and Elias Howe and Isaac Singer created the sewing machine. There's also an increase for the use of coal. This is kind of almost during America's first industrial revolution, where the use of coal allowed factories to move away from water, because it wasn't only, rivers were the first power sources for factories. And now cities began to grow to mine coal, and especially in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh. So that's Charles Goodyear, and here's interchangeable parts. So this same screw, where is it? All these parts would be made the same to make this gun. And so, it leads to interchangeable parts. Okay, men and women at work. Advancements in transportation allowed farmers to ship goods to all regions of the country. And that's going to lead to an increase in specialization in industry. You also have the Lowell System, which I mentioned in the last lecture. You have young and single women, mainly kind of farmers' daughters, would work in a factory. They would also have boarding houses for workers, curfews, and churches. And they also, for that time, had high wages. So then these single ladies could, save up some money. So when it came time for marriage, they could, help help with their new family. But why the Lowell system did fail, partly because of the Panic of 1837. You had to lower the wages. You couldn't keep paying people the high wages. And also there was an increase in immigrants that worked for less. Again, the idea of stealing their jobs. So here you have a woman from the Lowell system photograph. Okay, construction gangs of immigrants helped build the infrastructure of the United States, you know, roads, canals, railroads, bridges, buildings, that's infrastructure. Immigration also helped lead to a decrease in working conditions because many Americans then weren't concerned with working conditions for immigrants. So if they're going to take our job, let them work in the poor, unhealthy, unsanitary working conditions. There were early unions were formed around this time, but mainly come to fruition after the Civil War. And they were skilled craftsmen unions, and common law viewed the early unions as an illegal conspiracy. However, there's this famous court case in 1842 in Massachusetts, Commonwealth versus Hunt, where the Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled that state unions were actually legal and they could use their striking ability to not work. Other states soon agreed, and unions, however, did not gain power until the late 19th century. So here's a construction gang building some railroads, mainly immigrants. Continuing on, women weren't included in unions. Neither were African Americans. This idea of free labor. Northern workers viewed freedom as an absence of slavery. So Northern workers disliked slavery for two reasons: the lack of freedom, and slavery took away jobs from those people. So to include that, free African Americans in the North had little freedom, and they also sadly weren't considered legal citizens. So patterns, economic growth was not shared equally. Slaves, Native Americans, unskilled workers were left out, obviously. Sad to say, but urban areas saw high poverty rates. Many were immigrants and often homeless in urban areas. Free blacks in the North faced severe difficulties. They could not vote, attend public schools, use public services. You know, amid the racism, yeah, they couldn't even do that kind of stuff. Very tough, very tough. And there's this idea of geographic mobility, which was developed under the safety valve theory under Frederick Jackson Turner. And it wasn't often used, but it was an opportunity that was still there for Americans in times of economic crisis. They could move west to the frontier. And we kind of see examples of that during the Great Depression as well. There's Frederick Jackson Turner. Continuing on, men and women had increasingly different social roles. Women could almost never obtain a divorce. Sad, sad, sad. And then you have this idea, this is very important, cult of domesticity. It kind of piggybacks off of Republican motherhood during the Revolutionary War and after it, early American, this cult of domesticity where men and women had separate spheres, and women were encouraged to stay at home and raise children and instill moral values to their children. Also, single women did not have many occupational choices. They could either be teachers, nurses, or domestic servants, secretaries, you name it. They couldn't really, be a CEO. And yeah, it's tough. Yeah. So here's this mother reading to her, I believe that's her daughter, and the agricultural North. So the old Northwest, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, that area specialized in meat packing, especially in Cincinnati and Chicago. Cincinnati was nicknamed Porkopolis. And especially Chicago later on. Huge meat packing industries. And then that's going to lead to a specialization in agriculture across America. In the West, they focus on, livestock and dairy. In the South, cash crops, cotton, tobacco. And in the North and Mid-Atlantic regions, you had wheat, fruits, and vegetables. And agriculture inventions that helped were John Deere's steel plow and Cyrus McCormick's mechanical reaper, which helped with harvesting a lot of wheat during that time, and rural life, where the church played a large role in bringing the community together. And yeah, that happened a lot. So here you have pictures of Cincinnati, and all across Cincinnati, there are statues of pigs, the Rib King, and here you have Samuel McCormick's reaper. So that concludes. I know I talked a little fast. I didn't really go into too much depth, but that's kind of what your book is for. So hopefully you did enjoy that. This market revolution, cult of domesticity. Make sure you look out for that. All right. So hopefully you guys did enjoy. And as always, stay safe, wash your hands. Peace.